Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. Surprisingly, the story doesn't begin at all with Victor Frankenstein, but with a letter written by R. Walton, which is going to be sent to his sister, Mrs. Saville. The purpose of the letter is to update his sister on his voyage. His plan is to go off and explore the world on a ship, specifically the Arctic. Walton has a thirst for adventure and knowledge, so he wants to explore uncharted lands and make discoveries on his journey. He's mostly doing it for knowledge, though, but he is quite curious about the North Pole. Now, he doesn't know when he will return, but he is far too determined to turn back, and hopes one day, even if it's months or years out, the siblings will reunite. For his second letter, Walton confessed to his sister how much he missed having a friend, someone like-minded, and someone who wouldn't judge Walton for being a romantic. He's surrounded by other sailors, but I guess they don't make the qualifications. Anyways, for his fourth letter, he describes how the crew and himself are facing challenges, first getting caught in thick fog, then getting surrounded by irregular plains of ice. While looking out into the plains, they caught a human figure sledding with dogs. This was an unusual sight due to the fact that they're in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic, with no villages or shelters in sight, but because they're stuck, they can't really do much about it, and let the person disappear in the distance. Additionally, Walton noted how unusually gigantic the man seemed, almost 8 feet tall. Later that day, a broken piece of ice floated towards the boat, and on that piece of ice was a weak man, clearly different from the other one they've seen that was 8 feet tall, because this one is clearly average height, and he had his sled and a single dog with him. The crew refused to let him die, so they brought him onto the ship, but before he allowed them to, he asked the crew where they were going. To the North Pole, Walton answered. With this, the man agreed and came onto the ship. Remember when I said this man was weak? His limbs were practically frozen and he seemed extremely emaciated. The crew tried their best to help him recover and he's gotten better for the next few days, but only slightly. By the way, remember how Walton told his sister how much he missed having a friend and how dreadfully lonely he felt? Turns out Walton found himself quite interested in Victor, which indeed was the man that was floating on the ice. But honestly, with the way he wrote about Victor in the letters, he sounds obsessed. Okay, maybe not obsessed, but Walton is very observant. He rambles on about Victor's eyes and Victor's actions. He also is protective over Victor. He puts Victor in his cabin so he can look after him more, and he makes sure to not allow the crew to overwhelm him with questions, though one question was asked. And it was why Victor was out there in the first place. Turns out he's looking for someone who fled from him, and he didn't elaborate too much on the situation. Soon the crew mentioned the tall man on the sled that they spotted before finding Victor, and this interested him greatly. Victor now wants to be on deck, looking out for the man, but because he was, far too weak, the crew didn't let him in, so he had to stay in the cabin to recover. Victor and Walton developed a bond for the next few days, to the point Walton constantly cares and sympathizes with Victor, while Victor grew more comfortable enough to share his story with Walton. And this is where the story truly begins, and as Victor is telling his story, Walton is writing everything down so he can send it to his sister. Victor begins his story with how his parents met. He's a part of the Geneva's family, a distinguished family that everyone seems to respect and love. Later he describes how he met his childhood sweetheart and adopted sister/cousin, Elizabeth. I try not to think too much about it. Anyways, he meets Elizabeth when him and his mother visit the poor, and Victor's mother spotted a beautiful and angelic-looking orphan. A blonde girl with blue eyes and fair skin. That girl is Elizabeth. Victor's mom took the girl in because she didn't want a girl so fair to be in poverty. Everyone quickly loved Elizabeth, especially Victor. His mother joked that Elizabeth was Victor's gift when she was brought home, and Victor, being the kid that he was at the time, took that very seriously. He swore to protect and care for her because she's his. Okay. The two were raised together. Elizabeth grew up to be a calm young woman with a passion for poetry, while Victor grew up to be a curious young man with a thirst for knowledge. Victor wasn't a fan of crowds or many of his classmates, but there was one exception, a young man named Henry Clerval, my favorite by the way. A talented guy who composes songs and writes tales of adventures. Victor had a happy childhood, 2 loving parents, 2 younger brothers, 2 close friends, and a passion he follows. Victor found himself interested in the studies of nature and science and had to practically teach himself all the information he learned as he grew up. Even at a young age, Victor wanted to tackle the topic of death, but with the knowledge he had, he couldn't do much. So he studied with a lot of old books, from old alchemists and old philosophers. Anything that could help. Victor's now 17 and on track to attend a university on, I'm gonna butcher this, Ingolstadt. Too bad his mother is sick, and she dies. Oh, no. It was a calm death, and before she passed, she requested that Elizabeth and Victor marry. But that's a future task, because Victor wants to go to school. Mourning and sorrows aside, Victor needs more knowledge. So Victor gave his goodbyes to his family, Clerval and Elizabeth. Elizabeth promised to look after the people he cares for while Victor is away, and Clerval actually wanted to join Victor as his assistant, but his father didn't allow him. So Victor went to university in Ingolstadt alone. Victor knows he has to form new friendships while attending university, but his bonds with those back home are no match with a bunch of strangers, so he didn't really care for the people around him. Natural philosophy is one of the studies that fascinated Victor, though the professor, Mr. Kremp, believed Victor wasted his time with all the books he's reading because they're old and outdated. The professor recommended better books so Victor can learn the material correctly. Victor didn't like this, honestly. Victor wasn't a big fan of modern philosophy. Victor's goals are large and grand, while everything that's modern is just nothing fascinating. But Kremp did mention a professor named Waldman, which did pique Victor's curiosity. He went to one of Waldman's lectures, and it held Victor's full attention and was quite eye-opening for him. The professor didn't put down the old philosophers because he knew they were the building blocks to how the world is today. This professor interested Victor, and the two even got the opportunity to speak with each other. During their conversation, the professor actually encouraged Victor to continue pursuing his goals, and even helped assist Victor by providing him more knowledge. More determined than ever, Victor continued to pursue his goals, but little did Victor know, this would be his downfall. Victor began his research of death. He watched bodies decay and took notes over the past few months, and discovered the secrets of life. Victor never told Walton what the secret was and doesn't plan to do it because he doesn't want his mistakes to repeat in the future. However, Walton really wanted to know until Victor told him he'll change his mind after hearing the rest of the story. So he continued to explain what happened next. Victor collected body parts and used his knowledge of life on his experiments. He wanted to create something grand, and where better than his boarding house attic. Yep. He went many days for months without sleep because of this project, which, may I add, took him almost 2 years. Yikes! It was early in the morning, rain pouring outside, and Victor accomplished his goal. Let me read you a quote on the description of Victor's creation. His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covers the muscles and arteries underneath. His hair was of a luxurious black and flowing, his teeth of pearly whiteness, but these luxuriance only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes. They seemed almost of the same color as the dim white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion, and straight black lips. In short, spooky corpse man with scary yellow eyes and dark lips, gotta run. Victor's obsession and passion turned to horror and disgust, and he ran out of the room. Exhausted, Victor collapsed in his bed, hoping sleep would be an escape for him, but within his dreams he saw Elizabeth, and once he kissed her, she turned into a corpse, oddly reminiscent of his mother's corpse. This is a little bit of symbolism, but I'm not gonna get into that. He startled awake and was greeted with yellow eyes staring back at him. His creation was grinning at him, which, made Victor, scared, so he escaped and ran away before the creation could do anything to him. Victor was in denial of his creation and filled with anxiety the whole night until a carriage appeared, and inside was his dear friend Henry Clerval. The two friends were delighted to see each other, and this moment temporarily eased Victor's mind about everything that happened. Clerval noticed Victor's sickly appearance, but Victor reassured him that it was just university that's stressing him out. Clerval accepted this answer, but he now wanted to see Victor's dorm, and this sparked Victor's anxiety again because his bedroom was the last place he saw his creation. Surprisingly, when they went to his dorm, the creature was gone. This filled Victor with joy. Honestly, I would be more frightened because that means the creature is on the loose, but whatever, Victor was pleased. He laughed like a madman before passing out from exhaustion. This worried Clerval greatly, and he began nursing Victor back to health. Again, this project took up so much of Victor's time that it's not a surprise that he knocked out once exhaustion finally hit. He lacked a lot of sleep due to him researching and hunting for body parts at night, and I wouldn't be surprised if he forgot to eat because he prioritized his experiment over his own well-being. It's a miracle that this man is still alive with the condition he's in. Good thing Clerval is an amazing friend and helped Victor recover. Also, can I add how nice it is that they refer to each other as Dearest Clerval and Dear Victor? I want a friend that calls me Dear. That sounds sweet. Anyways, once Victor recovered, he asked Clerval how he should repay him. Clerval didn't want to be repaid because Victor is his friend, but he did wish that Victor rode back home more. His silence did startle everyone. He was gone for like 2 years doing who knows what, that because they don't know, he was creating a monster. So Victor promised to do better. Clerval and Victor continued to live together and continued with their studies. Everything was great until shit hit the fan! William, Victor's younger brother, was murdered. Yikes. Elizabeth can't help but blame herself for his death because she gave him a pendant that was stolen from his body, and because that was valuable, they could have possibly been the reason for his murder. Clerval and Victor immediately traveled back home to mourn with loved ones, but before going to his family's estate, on his way, Victor went to visit the location where his dead brother was found. It was raining hard on him, and as he questioned what kind of monster would do this to a young boy, lightning hit, brightening the surroundings enough to reveal a tall figure of a person. Once the two made eye contact, the figure ran away. It's been 2 years since Victor saw his creation. Victor tried his best to suppress the memories of the night, but after spotting it, he remembered everything. And because his monster's in Switzerland instead of Germany, where he made it, it had to be responsible for William's death because why else would it be there and near Victor's home? Now Victor blames himself for his brother's death. It was him who created this monster. The consequences of his own actions finally returned to bite him in the butt, and Victor can't do anything about it. He ran back home, and his family told Victor that the culprit of the murder was the trusted maid, Justine. Victor, of course, knew who the actual murderer was, but wondered what evidence they had against this woman. She had his mother's pendant, which William had before he was murdered. It was found in her pocket, and she was apprehended after this discovery. Victor tries to protest and say he knows who the actual murderer is, and that Justine is innocent, but he feared revealing what he did, so he didn't give too much detail to this claim. Anyways, everyone hopes he's right, and that Justine is found innocent, but despite everyone praising her good nature and her love for the Frankensteins, the evidence was pretty damning for her. Justine wants to continue to claim her innocence, but was intimidated to give a false confession because of her jailer's threats. Victor and Elizabeth visited Justine before her final moments, and she wished the Frankensteins well. Her kindness never faltered, not even at her execution. Elizabeth was saddened by this, and as for Victor, all it took was another death for him to grow a spine, and now his goal is to hunt down his creation. Victor wants to confront his creation, so he went to Montevert, a mountain, knowing his creation would follow him and reveal itself to him. Nothing more dramatic than a showdown at the peak of a mountain, am I right? The two faced each other, Victor expecting a fight. Victor screamed at his creation, wanting nothing more but for his creation to vanish, and Victor was willing to die to take it down until his creation started to speak to him. And quite eloquently, may I add. The creature degraded Victor for creating him and leaving him to fend for himself in a miserable world. Victor is responsible for this, and now he has to own up to his actions. If he doesn't, he'll face the consequences. Victor responded with a punch. Cool. The creature easily evaded him. He just wants to talk with Victor, not fight him. The creature explains to Victor how rough he has it ever since being brought to life. Everything around him lives in bliss while he is excluded. All the creature knows is a life of loneliness and hardships. He wishes for nothing more but happiness, and only Victor can assist him with this. The creature suggests that the two go to his cave so he can further explain his life story and how he's gone from being a newborn creature to an intelligent man. Victor was reluctant, but joined his creation, curious to how his creation became the thing he is today. Once the two settled in the cave, the creature began his tale. A story within a story. What fun. I'm sure Walton's sister is going to love this. I know I am. Once the creature was created, he was similar to an infant, both lost and confused. He took some clothes and stumbled off into the night, though I'm pretty sure the clothes were a little too small on him, so I'm sure he ripped it. Anyways, he took that into the night, and, well, he wandered the woods. He found nature quite beautiful and fascinating. He learned a lot from being out there, such as the fire is warm but shouldn't be touched, and the passage of time by observing the sun and moon rising and falling in the sky. His stay in the woods was relatively nice, but hunger and bad weather conditions was an issue. Lucky for him, he found a cottage. Not wanting to be in the snow, he entered the cottage. It was a pleasant surprise to the creature to discover how dry and warm it was inside. Too bad its residents didn't quite like the creature, so he had to run away to avoid getting hunted down by the owner. Honestly, whenever the creature makes contact with anyone, they would scream in horror and attack him. He learned quickly to avoid populated places. It was a sad existence, but he soon found a cottage in the open country and decided to take refuge under the house. It wasn't suitable, but it's still a shelter, and he's out of sight. Now, the people living within the home was a family made up of a young woman, a young man, and an old man. The young man and woman come and go from the house while the old man remains in the house for the most part. The creature grew attached to these group of humans. He loved the old man's music, and he related to the youth's emotions. The creature loved these humans so much that he even started to assist them by collecting firewood for them. He acted almost like their guardian angel. The more time the creature observed the humans, the better he got at speaking and learning the names of objects and people. This delighted him greatly. Finally, a way to communicate. However, he did not want to communicate with the family until he mastered the language, but based on his past experiences with other humans, I'm sure he's still hesitant even if he mastered it. And after looking at his reflection in a pool of water, he understood why people were terrified of him. Of course he would hesitate. He looks like a monster. Winter turned to spring and the days got better, warmer, the plants are starting to grow, and the farm is looking amazing. The creature continued to assist the family in secret, and they praised their unknown guardian. The creature longed to reveal himself to them, hoping they would look past his appearance and accept him with open arms. As he continued to observe the group, a new person was introduced. Another young woman who was very close to the young man. Thanks to their conversation, the creature learned more about human society, and when a book was read aloud, he listened intently. Then the creature explains their family drama, blah blah blah. I'm not going to retell it because I don't care. We're here for Frankenstein and his monster, not these random people. Anyways, the monster learns how to read, learns more stuff about life, questions his existence further, and winter is coming back around. How fast? Anyways, it turns out the old man is blind. Once the youths were away, the creature went to speak with the old man despite his fast-beating heart. The old man was kind and allowed him inside. They spoke and the creature told the old man about his situation, how he fears revealing himself to his protectors because he believes they'll see him as a beast that only wants to hurt them. Surprisingly, the old man offered to assist him. Based on their conversation, the old man believes the creature is a good man and is willing to talk on his behalf. That's when the footsteps of the youths were heard outside, and desperately, the creature asked the old man to explain to his family that they're the people he wants to befriend, and that he's their guardian who's assisted them in secret. Sadly, the youths didn't look past the creature's appearance, and the young man attacked him. The creature could have easily killed the young man, but didn't want to harm him, and just ran far away, saddened, because now he's truly alone. As he wandered the woods alone, he started to think. The world has been nothing but cruel to him, so he concludes that it's only fair that he should be cruel back. He declares war on humanity for rejecting him, his hatred only increasing when he thinks about his creator who abandoned him. He will get revenge. But after calming down, the creation felt bad for having these feelings and wished to return to the cottage. He wanted to make things right, but once he returned, he learned the family was moving. Filled with despair, his previous dark emotions returned to him, and he burned the house down. He returned to wandering the world, and as he wandered, he remembered his creator and how he mentioned his home in Geneva. That was his destination now. During his travels, hatred continued to consume him, but he still had a kind heart deep down. When he saw a little girl struggling in the river, he went to rescue her, but her companion didn't believe he was saving her and took her away from him so they could run. The creature followed, but ended up getting shot. He retreated into the woods. He just wanted to help, but in return he got injured. Because life continued to be so cruel to the creature, his kind heart was completely gone and replaced with hatred towards everything and everyone. Once his shoulder wound got better, he continued on his journey. He arrived at Geneva and found a young boy who was of course terrified of him. Once the creature learned that the boy was a Frankenstein, he killed him. He took the pendant off the boy's body and looked at the photo inside. It was Victor's mother, and the creature admired her beauty for a moment before his rage returned. He planted the pendant on Justine when he discovered her sleeping body and fled, knowing that it would incriminate her. Now we're back in the present, with the two still in the cave. Victor was at a loss for words, but the creature wasn't finished. He requested Victor to make a female creature. At first, Victor refused, but the creature started to reason with him. As long as the creature has someone to love and accompany him, he won't wreak havoc on the world and vanish with his companion. Victor seemed almost convinced with his creation's reasoning and was moved by his story, but he's still reluctant because having two monsters out in the world didn't seem smart. It seemed more dangerous than anything. The creature continued to beg and plead and promised to listen to Victor's demands, and this finally convinced Victor, even if only slightly. The monster left to allow Victor to do his thing, and Victor returned to Geneva. However, he didn't immediately start working because he was anxious over everything. His father reminded Victor to consider marrying Elizabeth in the future, but Victor, he's like, yo, I want to go on vacation and wants to go to England. He has a promise to fulfill, but no one knows that. Travel time skip, and Victor went to England with his friend Clerval. Clerval was a good contrast to Victor. Someone joyful and full of life eased Victor, so his company was more than welcomed. Now as Clerval enjoyed his little vacation, Victor began work. He went to work far from the watchful eye, so he used a boat to go to a lonely island. However, while working, he started to realize that giving his creation a girlfriend wouldn't solve all his problems. His creation might have agreed to his terms, but this female creation has not. She's unpredictable. She might not even like the creature, or she could turn out far worse than him. Or they could have babies and wreak havoc with their offsprings, who knows. Victor's fear got the best of him, so he destroyed his female creation. But guess what? His creation was watching him. The two locked eyes, and Victor could see the despair in his creation's eyes before it left. Victor was nothing but paranoid throughout the night, and in the morning the creature confronted him. Victor confirmed to the monster that he broke his promise and he doesn't care if he'll die for this, and the monster told Victor that he'll have his revenge. He even told Victor that he'll visit him on his wedding night. This, of course, both angered and scared Victor, but he couldn't do much because the monster had left on his boat. Victor remained in the hut, believing the creature's threats were pointed towards him, but nope. After a while, Victor went on a boat to return to the mainland and was, well, arrested. He is suspected of the death of Henry Clerval. No! Best boy, why? Anyways, Victor of course realized his monster has done the murder, and he was crushed. Saddened that the life of his friend was taken, and he was to blame because he refused the request of his creation. Victor remained in a prison for a while, not because he was found guilty, but because he grew ill and depressed, so people had to look after him. He was honestly a little crazy too. He blamed himself for all the deaths that happened, but luckily there was evidence to prove him not guilty, but Victor didn't care much about this. His father soon arrived to return Victor to Geneva and tried to help cheer Victor up, but Victor continued to claim he was to blame for the deaths of Justine, his brother William, and Clerval. This saddened his father and even made him believe his son has gone mad, which isn't too far off, but of course he doesn't know the half of it. During their travels, Victor received a letter from Elizabeth. Elizabeth wishes for nothing more but to marry Victor, but understands that if Victor does not want to marry her, she would accept it. If there was another woman, she would be fine with it. She just wants nothing more but for Victor's happiness. I swear Elizabeth is such a sweet woman. Now, Victor does love Elizabeth, and he swore to his father that once they arrive in Geneva, he'd marry her. Victor is determined to live a happy life with Elizabeth and started preparing for both their wedding and a fight. He carried pistols and daggers with him. The boy was strapped. He was ready. Anyways, happy and paranoid filled a wedding later, and the two were wed. They went to their vacation home, and Victor was preparing to see his creation. The monster promised to see him on his wedding night, so he was waiting. This worried Elizabeth, of course, because she noticed how paranoid he was throughout the day. And because she doesn't know anything about what was going on, she questioned Victor to see what was troubling him. Victor, not wanting to worry her further, just told her to go to bed and he'll join her later. She agreed and went to bed. Determined to protect Elizabeth, Victor kept his hand on his pistol and waited for the monster. Victor believes he was the sole target of his creation, but here's the tragic thing. After a while, he heard Elizabeth scream. He ran to the room and rushed to Elizabeth's side, but she was already dead. He couldn't save her. No! His creation really wanted to make Victor suffer. At this point, Victor finally put two and two together and realized that the monster didn't want to kill him, but to make Victor suffer by getting rid of all his loved ones. So far, he's succeeding. Victor looked towards the window and he saw his creation staring at him with a smile. His creation pointed at Elizabeth's corpse and mocked Victor with a laugh. Victor was still strapped, of course, so he started to shoot at the monster. The monster ran off. Obviously, he didn't want to get shot. He experienced it before. He did not like the experience, so of course he ran. He ran far. Victor then returned to Geneva to tell his father about Elizabeth, and his father died after a few days. Wow, oh no. Victor is losing everyone, and the only person he has left is his other brother, but if I'm being honest, he's not really that important to the story. He probably died too anyways. Who knows? After all this suffering, Victor finally decided to share his sins and tell someone about his creations. He confessed to the magistrate, but he sounded like a crazy man and no one believed him. Left with nothing else to do, Victor went to the grave of his family to mourn. Sadly, his mourning was cut short when he heard laughter, and when he looked up, he saw his creation staring back at him. Filled with rage, Victor started to chase after his creation. The chase began on foot and continued for several months. And when Victor was close to losing track of the monster would leave clues so the chase could continue. This was humiliating for Victor because he knew the monster was doing this on purpose, but what else can he do? He doesn't have a life to return to. The only thing he can do is correct his mistakes and kill the creation, so the chase must continue. I'm sure the monster felt like the situation was like a game. To keep his toy alive, he made sure Victor wouldn't die in the environments they were in. From rocky mountains to extremely hot deserts, the monster refused to allow Victor to die to the elements and kept him alive so Victor could continue their chase. He did this by providing notes, food, and clothes. Oh, alright. The chase continued until they found themselves in the Arctic and sledding with dogs. And as you probably all assumed, this all led up to Victor being found by the crew and Walton. Remember the guy who's writing letters to his sister? Yeah, we're back here now. Once Victor finished his tale, he pleaded with Walton that if anything were to happen to him, like his death, that Walton will continue the chase and kill his creation so Victor can finally have vengeance. In the letter sent to Walton's sister, he wrote that he believes Victor because he remembered seeing that tall figure that was sledding a while ago. That must be the monster of Victor's story. Anyways, the trip couldn't continue because again, the ship was stuck. The crew wanted to turn back when they managed to break free from the ice, and Walton was hesitant, but he didn't want to risk the lives of the crew and agreed to turn back. Victor wished that they continued moving because again, he's in the middle of a chase, but he understands Walton's decision, and he told Walton that once he gets better, he'll leave the ship to continue the chase. Too bad he died! Yes, you heard me right! Victor Frankenstein, the man himself, the legend! He died. As Walton was writing about Victor's death and his letters to his sister, he heard a noise coming from the room where Victor's body lied. When he entered the room, he saw the monster standing over Victor's body. The two didn't expect to see each other, so of course they were both surprised. One was shocked because it's literally a grotesque monster in front of him, and the other was surprised because he didn't expect to see someone else. The monster seemed to be mourning for Victor's death. The purpose of him to continue his existence is now gone. What now? Walton called him a monster, but the creature retaliated by saying the world is what made him a monster. Everyone who wronged him, including Victor, is what made him a monster. Loneliness is what corrupted him, and now that Victor's gone, he's lonely once again. Left with no other purpose in life, the monster decided to end it all. He decided the fire was the best option because it hurt him before, so maybe it could kill him. Victor brought him suffering, and so did the world, but once he dies, he will be filled with peace because all the miserable emotions he feels will cease and his ashes will flow freely in the wind. With that, the monster left the ship, and the book ended there. gosh, what a ride! What's the lesson of this tale? Maybe don't play God and create a being that is 6 feet tall and incredibly strong? Joking, kind of. If anything, it's to be mindful of your actions, because there will always be consequences. I really enjoyed reading this. Based on everything I knew about Frankenstein, this was actually very different. I actually like this a lot more than the knowledge I knew prior. Anyways, I hope you enjoy. I better not get you dying on me. Like and subscribe! And sorry that this video took me so long. I'm a very slow drawer. I also have a work, and I was waiting for a mic, but the mic did not work. Great. But I swear for my next projects, it will probably be something that wouldn't take me forever. I'll try to keep that promise. Bye!